Sometimes life breaks you so completely that you forget what hope feels like. For Noah Blake, a widowed father struggling to keep his daughter's asthma medication paid for, that breaking point came with a cruel joke, an inheritance of exactly $1 from a great-uncle he'd never met. He laughed bitterly and threw the legal notice in the trash. But the next morning, everything changed when a vintage car pulled up to his trailer and an elderly lawyer stepped out. The lawyer spoke just 7 words. The dollar was ceremonial. The legacy is waiting. Within hours, Noah found himself standing before Weywarden Keep, a forgotten castle hidden in the misty hills that had belonged to his family for centuries. The castle held secrets that would change his life forever. But why had this inheritance been kept hidden for so long? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun filtered through the thin curtains of the single wide trailer, casting long shadows across the cramped living space that Noah Blake called home. He sat at the small kitchen table, calculator in one hand, stack of bills in the other, performing the same disheartening arithmetic that had become his daily ritual for the past 3 years. Electricity, past due. Water, final notice. Emma's asthma medication, insurance claim, denied again. On his left ring finger, Sarah's wedding band caught the light. A simple gold band that he'd never been able to remove, not since the day the cancer finally took her. Some mornings, he'd catch himself reaching across the bed, expecting to find her there, ready to help him figure out how to stretch $20 until Friday. "Dad?" 8-year-old Emma appeared in the doorway, her strawberry blonde hair, so much like her mother's, sticking up at odd angles. She clutched her inhaler in one small hand and her favorite stuffed elephant in the other. "I couldn't sleep good. My chest feels tight again." Noah's heart clenched as he watched his daughter struggle with each breath. Dr. Martinez had been clear. Emma's asthma was worsening, likely triggered by stress and the trailer's poor air quality. The new medication would help, but at $300 a month, it might as well have been 3,000. "Come here, sweetheart." He pulled Emma onto his lap, feeling how light she'd become. When had she gotten so thin? "Let's do your breathing exercises like Mom taught us." Together they counted breaths. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 6. It was Sarah who'd researched every technique, who'd turned their frightening diagnosis into a manageable routine. Even now, gone 3 years, she was still taking care of them. "Tell me about the castle again," Emma whispered against his shoulder. Noah smiled, despite everything. For the past few months, Emma had been fascinated by fairy tales, particularly ones involving princesses in castles. He'd made up stories about brave princesses who saved kingdoms and fathers who built magnificent homes for their daughters. In their imaginary world, money never ran short and mothers never got sick. "Well," he began, his voice taking on the storytelling cadence that always calmed her, "this princess lived in a castle made of moonlight and morning mist. Her father was a skilled craftsman who could fix anything that was broken, like you. Fix things for Mr. Peterson?" Just like that. And every night the princess would look out her tower window and make wishes on the stars. Emma's breathing gradually steadied as Noah continued the familiar tale. Through the thin walls, he could hear their neighbor Mrs. Chen getting ready for her early shift at the diner. The sound of her pickup truck starting reminded him that he needed to be at the Hendersons' house by 7 to install their new kitchen faucet. After Sarah's death, Noah had cobbled together a living from handyman jobs and part-time mechanic work at Pete's auto shop. It kept food on the table, barely, but it meant Emma spent too many hours in after-school care, too many evenings, watching him stress over numbers that never added up right. "Dad, do we have any family?" Emma asked suddenly, her green eyes, Sarah's eyes, looking up at him with that unsettling directness that children possess. Like grandparents or uncles or anybody. The question hit him like a cold wind. Noah had grown up in foster care, past between families who saw him as a temporary obligation rather than a child who needed roots. He'd never known his parents, never had extended family gatherings or birthday calls from relatives. When he'd married Sarah, he'd gained her warm, bustling family, but they'd moved to Arizona after the funeral, keeping in touch through Christmas cards and occasional phone calls that grew shorter each year. Just you and me, Em. We're a team. Remember? But what about your family, like from before you were born? Before he could answer, Emma slipped from his lap and padded to the small living area where yesterday's mail lay scattered on the coffee table. Her curiosity was relentless, a trait she'd inherited from Sarah, along with her stubborn streak and her laugh that could light up a room. What's this one? She held up the crumpled legal notice that Noah had angrily discarded the day before. Nothing important, sweetheart, just some paperwork. But Emma was already smoothing out the wrinkles, her reading skills improving every day. Blake versus Blake Estate Services. Noah Blake. Great-uncle Cornelius Blake. She looked up, eyes wide. Dad, you do have family. It says here about your great-uncle. Noah's stomach dropped. He'd hoped she wouldn't see that particular piece of mail. Emma, that's just some mistake. Sometimes these lawyers get confused about, but it says you inherited something. $1. She giggled. That's not very much, but still, it means we have family, right? Somewhere? The innocent joy in her voice nearly broke his heart. Here was his daughter, desperate for connection, for the kind of extended family that other kids took for granted. And all he could offer her was the harsh reality that $1 was probably someone's idea of a sick joke. Sometimes adults make mistakes. With paperwork, he said gently, taking the notice from her hands. This probably isn't even meant for me, but your name is right there, and it says great-uncle. That means your daddy had a brother. Noah had never told Emma about his childhood, how he'd been found as an infant at a hospital with nothing but a name pinned to his blanket. No family history, no medical records, no stories to pass down. He'd created an identity from scratch, building his life around Sarah and then around Emma, never looking backward because there was nothing to. See, even if it's real, $1 isn't going to change anything for us. But it means somebody thought about you. Somebody knew your name. The simple truth of that statement hit him harder than he expected. For 35 years, he'd believed he was completely alone in the world. The idea that somewhere, someone, had carried his name forward, had remembered he existed. It stirred something in his chest that felt dangerously close to hope. We should call them, Emma said decisively, the lawyer people, to say thank you. Sweetheart, I don't think. A sharp knock at the trailer door interrupted him. Through the small window, Noah could see an unfamiliar figure, an elderly man, in a dark suit, standing beside what looked like a vintage car. At 7 in the morning, this couldn't be good news. Noah opened the door cautiously, Emma peering around his legs with unabashed curiosity. The man was perhaps 70, with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. His suit was impeccably tailored, and he carried himself with the quiet dignity of someone accustomed to delivering important news. Mr. Noah Blake. Yes? My name is Thornfield. I represent the Blake Estate Services. His voice carried a slight British accent, formal, but not unkind. I believe you received our correspondence regarding your inheritance. Noah felt Emma's hand slip into his. Like I said, I think there's been some mistake. I don't have any family, and $1 seems... The dollar was ceremonial, Mr. Blake. Thornfield's smile was gentle, almost paternal. The legacy is waiting. I'm sorry. What? Perhaps it would be easier to show you rather than explain. Would you and your daughter care to take a drive with me? I think you'll find the journey quite illuminating. Noah looked down at Emma, whose eyes had gone round with excitement. Every instinct told him to close the door, to protect them both from whatever scheme this was. People like him didn't receive mysterious inheritances. People like him got eviction notices and past due bills, not vintage cars and well-dressed lawyers speaking in riddles. but something in Thornfield's manner, a patient kindness that reminded him of the better foster parents he'd known, made him hesitate. Where exactly would we be going? Not far. Perhaps an hour's drive into the countryside. I assure you, Mr. Blake, this is quite legitimate. Your great-uncle Cornelius was very specific in his instructions regarding the inheritance. Cornelius Blake was real, very real indeed, and very particular about who should inherit Weywarden Keep. Weywarden what? Thornfield's smile widened. Perhaps you should see for yourself. Emma tugged on Noah's hand. Please, Dad. It could be an adventure. An adventure. When was the last time either of them had experienced anything that could be called an adventure? Their lives had been reduced to survival mode. Work, bills, medication, repeat. The idea of stepping outside that suffocating routine, even for a few hours, felt like oxygen to drowning lungs. "All right," Noah heard himself saying. "Let me get Emma's jacket," as they walked toward the vintage Bentley, because of course it was a Bentley. Noah caught Mrs. Chen watching from her window with undisguised curiosity. By tomorrow, the whole trailer park would be buzzing with speculation about the Blake family's mysterious visitors. The car's interior smelled like leather and old wood, with a dignity that made Noah suddenly aware of his work clothes and Emma's. He faded pajamas, but Thornfield seemed completely unbothered by their appearance, helping Emma with her seatbelt and offering her a mint from a small silver tin. "Is this really happening?" Noah murmured, as the car pulled away from the only home Emma had ever known. "Sometimes, Mr. Blake," Thornfield said, catching his eyes in the rearview mirror, "life has plans for us that we cannot imagine. Your great-uncle understood this very well." As they drove through the awakening town and into the rolling hills, beyond, Noah found himself holding Emma's hand tightly, Sarah's ring warm against his finger. Whatever waited at the end of this journey, whatever Weywarden Keep turned out to be, he had the strangest feeling that Sarah would have approved. After all, she'd always believed in magic. The countryside unfolded before them like pages from a forgotten storybook. Rolling hills covered in morning mist gave way to dense forests where ancient oaks stood sentinel along winding roads that seemed untouched by modern progress. Emma pressed her face to the window, watching the world transform from suburban sameness into something that belonged in her fairy tale fantasies. "Are we going to a real castle?" she whispered, her breath fogging the glass. "We shall see," Thornfield replied, his eyes twinkling in the rearview mirror. "Tell me, young lady, what do you know about your family history?" Emma looked at Noah uncertainly. "Dad says we don't have any family, just us." "Ah, but that's where you're mistaken. The Blake family has quite a remarkable lineage. Inventors, dreamers, builders of impossible things." Thornfield navigated a particularly sharp curve with practiced ease. "Your great-great-grandfather designed bridges that shouldn't have been able to stand, yet they've weathered a century of storms. Your great-grandmother created mechanical clocks so precise they still keep perfect time today." Noah felt a strange stirring in his chest. "How do you know all this?" "Because, Mr. Blake, it's been my family's responsibility to keep track of yours. The Thornfields have served the Blake estate for 4 generations. My grandfather knew your great-uncle as a young man." The car climbed steadily now, the road becoming narrower and more isolated. Ancient stone walls appeared alongside the road, covered in ivy and topped with moss that spoke of centuries undisturbed. The mist grew thicker, wrapping around the car like ghostly fingers. "There," Thornfield said quietly, pointing ahead, "your inheritance." Through the swirling mist, Noah saw what looked like a vision from another world, rising from the hillside. Like something carved from dreams and stone, Weywarden Keep emerged from the fog. It wasn't the fairy tale castle of Disney movies. This was something older, more real, more weathered by time and elements. Gothic towers reached toward the grey sky, their surfaces darkened by centuries of rain. Ivy climbed the walls in intricate patterns, as if the earth itself was trying to reclaim the structure. But despite its age, despite the obvious need for repair, the castle possessed an undeniable majesty. It stood proudly at the edge of a deep gorge, its foundation seemingly carved from the living rock of the hillside. Windows reflected the morning light like watchful eyes, and somewhere high in the tallest tower, a flag snapped in the wind. "Oh, my goodness," Emma breathed, her voice filled with wonder. "It's real, it's actually real." Noah couldn't speak. The sight of the castle triggered something deep in his memory. Not a specific recollection, but a feeling, like the echo of a song he'd once known. How was this possible? How could something so magnificent, so impossible, belong to someone like him? Thornfield guided the car through massive iron gates that stood open as if expecting their arrival. The driveway was lined with oak trees, so old their branches formed a cathedral ceiling overhead. As they drew closer to the castle, Noah could see the intricate stonework, the carefully carved gargoyles perched on corners, the stained glass windows that caught and scattered rainbows across the courtyard. "I don't understand," Noah said as the car came to a stop before the main entrance. "This must be worth millions. Why would someone leave it to me? I didn't even know I had a great uncle." Thornfield turned in his seat, his expression serious now. "Weywarden Keep can only be inherited by a Blake family member who has lost everything, Mr. Blake. Someone who understands that material wealth means nothing compared to love, family, and purpose." "Lost everything?" "Your wife, your financial security, your sense of hope, perhaps." Thornfield's voice was gentle but direct. "Cornelius Blake spent his final years researching his family tree, looking for the right person to carry on his work. He followed your story, your time in foster care, your marriage to Sarah, her illness, your struggles since her death. He saw in you someone who would understand the true value of what this place represents." Emma had already unbuckled her seatbelt and was pressing against the window, trying to see everything at once. "Can we go inside, please?" Thornfield reached into his jacket and withdrew an ornate key, unlike anything Noah had ever seen. It was clearly ancient, made of brass that had been polished to a warm glow. The head of the key was decorated with intricate engravings, a tree with spreading branches, symbols that looked almost like constellations, and at the center, the letter B worked into an elaborate design. "This key has been waiting for you for 50 years, Thornfield said, placing it in Noah's palm. The metal was surprisingly warm, as if it had been resting near a fire. "Cornelius sealed the castle the day he died, with instructions that it could only be opened by his heir, someone who would appreciate both its wonders and its responsibilities." Responsibilities? Cornelius was working on something when he died. Something important, something that he believed could help people heal from the kind of loss you've experienced. Noah stared at the key, feeling its weight. Not just the physical weight, but the weight of expectations, of legacy, of a future he'd never imagined possible. What if I'm not the right person? What if I can't live up to whatever he wanted? "Then the castle will know," Thornfield said simply. "Weywarden Keep has a way of choosing its own keeper. If you're not meant to be here, you'll know soon enough." Emma couldn't contain herself any longer. "Dad, can we please go inside? I want to see everything." Noah looked at his daughter's excited face, then at the impossible castle rising before them, then at the warm key in his palm. Everything rational in his mind screamed that this was too good to be true, that people like him didn't inherit castles, that there had to be a catch or a cruel prank waiting to unfold. But Emma was already out of the car, standing in the courtyard with her arms spread wide, spinning in circles and laughing with pure joy. When was the last time he'd heard her laugh like that? When was the last time either of them had felt wonder? Instead of worry, "All right," he said, climbing out of the Bentley, "let's see what we've inherited." The castle's main entrance was a massive wooden door studded with iron bolts and hinges that looked like they could support the weight of centuries. Noah inserted the key into the lock, surprised when it turned smoothly, despite its obvious age. "Chup, The door swung open with a deep, resonant creak that seemed to echo through the interior. Cool air rushed out to meet them, carrying scents of old wood, stone, and something else, something that reminded Noah of libraries and workshops and places where important work was done. Emma gasped and took his hand as they stepped across the threshold together. The entrance hall was magnificent, high vaulted ceilings supported by carved stone pillars, a grand staircase that curved up toward the upper floors, and along the walls, portraits of men and women in clothing from different eras. But what struck Noah most was the feeling of homecoming that settled over him like a warm blanket. "Welcome home, Mr. Blake," Thornfield said from behind them, his voice carrying an echo of deep satisfaction. "Welcome to Weywarden Keep." Emma was already running toward the staircase, her footsteps echoing in the vast space. "Dad! Look at all the pictures! They look like you!" Noah approached the portrait gallery slowly, his breath catching as he saw what Emma meant. Face after face stared down at him, men and women with his same dark hair, his same stubborn jawline, his same green eyes. Each portrait bore a small brass nameplate: Aldrich Blake, 1847–1923, Master Bridge Builder; Constance Blake, 1854–1931, Clockmaker Extraordinaire; Marcus Blake, 1902–1967, Inventor of Impossible Things. And at the end of the gallery, a portrait of a man who could have been Noah's older brother, Cornelius Blake, 1924–1975, Keeper of Memories. He never married, Thornfield explained, joining Noah before the portrait. Never had children of his own. But he never forgot that he was part of something larger than himself. The Blake family has always been about building things that last, creating beauty that endures, solving problems that seem impossible. "I'm just a handyman," Noah said quietly. "I fix leaky faucets and patch drywall. I'm not an inventor or a bridge builder or—" "You kept your family together after an unimaginable loss," Thornfield interrupted. "You've raised a remarkable daughter, while working multiple jobs and never losing hope. You've built a life from nothing, Mr. Blake. That makes you exactly the kind of Blake this castle has been waiting for." Emma's voice carried down from somewhere deeper in the castle. "Dad, there's a library in here, with books that go all the way to the ceiling." Noah looked around the entrance hall one more time, taking in the impossible reality of it all. Somewhere, in the distance, he could hear Emma's footsteps and excited chatter as she explored her new kingdom. The afternoon light streaming through the stained glass windows painted rainbow patterns on the stone floor, and for the first time in 3 years, Noah Blake felt something he'd almost forgotten how to feel: hope. "What happens now?" he asked. Thornfield smiled and headed toward the door. "Now, Mr. Blake, you begin to understand why you're really here. The castle will teach you just as it taught Cornelius, just as it taught all the Blakes who came before you. You're leaving, for now, but I'll return soon. There are legal matters to arrange, utilities to reconnect, and preparations to make." Thornfield paused at the threshold. "Oh, and Mr. Blake, you might want to explore the library." Cornelius left. "Detailed journals of his work. I think you'll find them quite illuminating." The massive door closed behind him with a sound like finality, leaving Noah and Emma alone in their inherited castle. In the sudden silence, Noah could hear his own heartbeat, Emma's distant exploration, and something else, a sense of rightness, of pieces falling into place after years of chaos. He touched Sarah's ring on his finger, feeling her presence in this moment of transformation. "What do you think, love?" he whispered to the empty air. "Think we can handle being castle owners?" From somewhere deep in the building, Emma's laughter echoed through the halls like music, and Noah Blake smiled for the first time in longer than he could remember. The library was everything Emma had promised, and more. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined the walls, filled with volumes that ranged from leather-bound classics to technical manuals with worn spines. Tall windows let in streams of afternoon light that illuminated dust motes dancing in the air like tiny stars. A massive fireplace dominated one wall, its mantel carved with the same intricate tree symbol Noah had seen on the key. Emma had claimed a window seat and was carefully examining what appeared to be a children's book about mechanical inventions, her inhaler resting forgotten on the cushion beside her. Noah noticed with relief that her breathing seemed easier here. The castle's air was clean and cool, free of the stuffiness that plagued their trailer. "Look at this one, Dad," she called, holding up a picture of an elaborate clockwork bird. "It says here that great-great-grandmother Constance made birds that could really fly and sing real songs." Noah approached the portrait gallery that continued into the library, studying each face with growing amazement. Now that he looked more carefully, he could see shared characteristics beyond mere resemblance. The same determined set to their jaws, the same thoughtful eyes, the same calloused hands that spoke of people who worked with tools and understood how things fit together. The nameplate under Cornelius's portrait included more detail than the others. Cornelius Blake, 1924-1975, inventor, keeper of memories, builder of bridges between past and present. "Between past and present," Noah murmured. "What did that mean? Dad, what's this?" Emma had moved to an ornate desk positioned near the largest window. She was pointing at what looked like an architectural blueprint, yellowed with age, but still clearly detailed. Noah joined her, his experienced eye immediately recognizing the precise draftsmanship. The blueprint showed the castle's floor plan, but with additions he hadn't seen during their initial exploration. Hidden passages, secret rooms, and what appeared to be an extensive underground area marked simply as the workshop. "It looks like there are parts of the castle we haven't found yet," he said, tracing the lines with his finger. "See this? There's supposed to be a passage behind this bookshelf that leads to a secret room!" Emma's eyes went wide with excitement. "Like in the movies." Noah examined the bookshelf more carefully. The blueprint showed that the passage was hidden behind a section containing books about memory and time. Sure enough, he found a collection of volumes with those exact topics. When he pulled on a book titled The Persistence of Moments, he felt it give way with a soft click. The entire section of bookshelf swung inward on silent hinges, revealing a narrow stone staircase that descended into darkness. "Oh my goodness," Emma whispered. "It's real. There really is a secret passage." Cool. Air drifted up from below, carrying the scents of metal and oil and something else. Ozone, like the air after a lightning storm. Noah found a light switch just inside the passage, and electric bulbs in metal cages illuminated the stairs with warm, steady light. "Should we explore?" Emma asked, practically vibrating with excitement. Noah hesitated. Every parental instinct warned him about mysterious underground passages in inherited castles, but the blueprint seemed legitimate, and the electrical work appeared professional and safe. Besides, Emma's enthusiasm was infectious. When was the last time she'd been excited about anything besides her fairy tale stories? "All right, but we stay together and we go slowly." The staircase was carved directly from the living rock beneath. The castle, with walls so smooth they seemed almost polished. As they descended, the temperature dropped noticeably, and the sound of their footsteps echoed in the confined space. After perhaps 20 steps, they emerged into a chamber that took Noah's breath away. Cornelius Blake's workshop was a marvel of organized chaos. Workbenches lined the walls, covered with tools ranging from traditional woodworking implements to devices Noah couldn't begin to identify. Gears, springs, and mechanical components were sorted into labeled bins and drawers. Blueprints and technical drawings covered every available surface, held down by paperweights that looked like small mechanical sculptures. But what dominated the space was the device in the center of the room. It was perhaps 8 feet tall and 6 feet wide, constructed primarily of brass and what looked like crystal. Intricate gears and clockwork mechanisms were visible through glass panels, and the entire apparatus seemed to pulse with a faint warm light. It reminded Noah of a grandfather clock crossed with a pipe organ, with elements that suggested neither, crystalline formations that caught and reflected light in impossible ways, metal components arranged in patterns that seemed both mechanical and organic. "What is it?" Emma asked in a hushed voice, approaching the device with the fearless curiosity that made Noah's heart both swell with pride and clench with worry. "I have no idea." Noah found a journal lying open on the nearest workbench, its pages covered with neat handwriting and detailed sketches. The entry was dated just 3 months before Cornelius's death. "Day 1247 of the Memory Project," he read. Aloud, "The harmonic resonance achieved in yesterday's test suggests that we are finally approaching a breakthrough. The crystals respond to emotional imprinting far more readily than I had hoped. If my calculations are correct, it should be possible to capture not just images or sounds, but the complete sensory and emotional experience of a moment in time. I think constantly of my dear brother Thomas, lost to us when we were both so young. If this device works as intended, future generations of our family will never have to lose their loved ones completely. Memory is the bridge between past and present, between the living and the departed. We must never forget that love transcends time." Noah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cool air. "Thomas must have been my grandfather," he murmured. "The brother Cornelius lost." Emma had found another workbench covered with smaller devices, intricate mechanical toys, clockwork animals, and what appeared to be miniature versions of the larger machine. She picked up a small crystalline sphere that immediately began to glow with soft, warm light. "Dad, look, it lights up when I touch it." The sphere pulsed gently in her small hands, and for just a moment, Noah could have sworn he heard something, a whisper of sound like distant laughter, a glimpse of movement in the crystal's depths that might have been a child running through a garden. "Careful, Em. We don't know how these things work." But Emma was already setting the sphere down and examining the larger device. "There's a place here that looks like where you put your hands," she said, pointing to 2 smooth indentations in what appeared to be the machine's control panel. Noah found more journal entries, each more fascinating and troubling than the last. Cornelius had spent decades developing what he called memory preservation technology, devices that could capture and replay not just visual or auditory recordings, but complete experiential memories. The larger machine was apparently designed to create what he termed memorial spaces, environments where people could safely experience preserved memories of their departed loved ones. He was trying to help people deal with grief, Noah realized, reading an entry that made his throat tight. He lost his brother when they were children, and he spent his whole life trying to find a way to bring back the people we love. "Like Mommy?" Emma asked quietly. Noah's heart clenched. "Yes, sweetheart. Like Mommy." He found the final journal. Entry dated just a week before Cornelius's death. "The machine is nearly complete, but I grow weaker each day. The irony is not lost on me. I have spent my life trying to preserve others' memories, yet I will not live to see my own work finished. Perhaps that is as it should be. The Blake family has always been about building for future generations, not for our own glory. I have arranged for the castle to pass to whichever family member most needs what it can offer. Someone who understands loss, someone who knows that the greatest inventions are not those that make us wealthy, but those that help us heal." The show machine waits for hands guided by love rather than ambition. When the right person comes, they will know how to complete what I have started. Emma had moved to a corner where children's toys from different eras were carefully arranged on shelves. Wooden horses with real manes, mechanical birds that looked like they could take flight at any moment, dolls with faces so lifelike they seemed ready to speak. A small placard read, "For the children who will play here someday." He knew, Noah said softly. Somehow, he knew that a father and daughter would end up here. "The toys aren't dusty," Emma observed. "It's like someone's been taking care of them." She was right. Despite the workshop's obvious age, everything was clean and well maintained. The tools showed no sign of rust. The mechanical devices gleamed, as if recently polished, and the large machine hummed with barely audible energy. "Dad, I think the castle is magic," Emma said matter-of-factly, the way only an 8-year-old could state the impossible as simple truth. Noah looked around the workshop, at the impossible device that seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat, at the toys waiting for children who were finally here, at the journals filled with a lonely man's lifetime of work dedicated to helping others heal from loss. "You know what, Em? I think you might be right." As they climbed back up the stone stairs, toward the library, Noah felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. Cornelius had left him more than a castle. He'd left him an unfinished mission, a chance to help other people find peace with their losses the way he'd never quite managed to find peace with Sarah's death. Back in the library, Emma curled up, in the window seat with one of Cornelius's mechanical toys, a small dragon that moved its wings and occasionally puffed tiny clouds of steam. The afternoon light was growing golden, and for the first time in years, Noah felt something that might have been contentment. But as he looked out at the castle grounds stretching toward the hills beyond, he couldn't shake the feeling that their real journey was just beginning. Somewhere in this ancient place was the key to completing Cornelius's work, to fulfilling whatever destiny had brought them here. And somehow, he knew that Sarah would have wanted him to try. The next morning arrived with golden sunlight streaming through the castle's tall windows, and Emma woke in what had once been the nursery, a room perfectly sized for a child, with built-in shelves lined with books and toys from across the decades. Noah had found her there the previous evening, fast asleep on a small bed that seemed to have been waiting just for her, breathing easily in the clean castle air. He'd spent the night in what was clearly the master bedroom, lying in a four-poster bed that should have felt too grand for someone like him, but somehow felt exactly right. For the first time in months, he'd slept deeply, without the usual anxiety dreams about bills and Emma's health. Now, standing in the workshop with Cornelius's final journal in his hands, Noah studied the massive memory device with new understanding. The blueprint he'd found, tucked between the journal's pages, showed not just how the machine was supposed to work, but what pieces were still missing. "It's like a really complicated puzzle," Emma said, having appointed herself his assistant in figuring out their inheritance. She'd found a smaller blueprint that seemed to show the device's control mechanisms and was comparing it to the actual machine with the serious concentration of a child absorbed in important work. Exactly like a puzzle. Noah traced the connections between various components, his handyman's experience helping him understand the mechanical relationships even when the purpose remained mysterious. "See this section here? These gears should connect to this crystal array, but there's a gap, like a missing piece?" Several missing pieces, actually. Noah found another page of notes where Cornelius had sketched various mechanical components. He ran out of time to finish it. Emma carefully examined the machine's base, where several obvious connection points waited for components that weren't there. "But we could finish it, couldn't we? You're really good at fixing things." The innocent confidence in her voice made Noah's chest warm. When had anyone last believed so completely in his abilities? "I don't know, Em. This is pretty complex stuff. I fix leaky pipes and broken doorknobs, not memory-capturing machines. But you understand how things work. You always figure out how to fix stuff that other people say is broken forever." As if summoned by their conversation, they heard footsteps on the stone stairs. Thornfield appeared, carrying a leather portfolio and wearing the same gentle smile as the day before. "Good. Morning, I trust you slept well?" "Better than we have in months," Noah admitted. "The air here is amazing for Emma's asthma." "Ah, yes. The castle has always been known for its healthful atmosphere. Something about the elevation and the natural springs beneath the foundation." Thornfield approached the memory device with obvious familiarity. I see you've discovered Cornelius's great work. It's incredible, but it's not finished. He died before he could complete it. Indeed, a great tragedy, both personal and for the many people who might have benefited from his invention. Thornfield opened his portfolio and withdrew several documents. Which brings me to the practical matters we need to discuss. Over the next hour, Thornfield explained the reality of their inheritance. The castle came with a substantial trust, a fund for maintenance and restoration, enough to ensure that Noah and Emma would never face financial hardship again. But there were conditions. The Blake estate has always existed to serve a purpose beyond mere ownership, Thornfield explained. Each generation has been expected to contribute something meaningful, a bridge, a clock, an invention, some legacy that helps others. Cornelius believed that completing his memory device would be your contribution. But what if I can't? What if I'm not smart enough or skilled enough? Then you'll learn. The castle has an excellent library, and there are craftsmen in the nearby village who remember working with Cornelius. He trained several apprentices over the years who still practice traditional metalworking and precision engineering. Emma had been listening with the focused attention she usually reserved for fairy tales. So Dad has to finish the memory machine to help sad people feel better? That's a very good way to put it, young lady. Yes, the machine is designed to help people process grief in a healthy way, to preserve the joy of their memories while accepting the reality of loss. Noah found himself thinking of the support group Dr. Martinez had suggested after Sarah's death, the one he'd been too proud and too angry to attend. How many other people were struggling alone with their grief, unable to move forward because they feared forgetting their loved ones? There's something else, Thornfield continued, withdrawing a final document from his portfolio. The village has been waiting for the castle to reopen. For generations, Weywarden Keep served as a gathering place for the community. Cornelius's father hosted harvest festivals and winter celebrations. His grandfather opened the grounds for summer picnics and children's games. The castle was never meant to be a private retreat. It was meant to be a place where people came together. Emma's eyes lit up. Like a community center, where families could come and play and have parties? Exactly. And if Noah succeeds in completing the memory device, the castle could become something even more special, a place where families dealing with loss could find comfort and healing. Noah felt the weight of expectation settling on his shoulders, but it wasn't the crushing weight of bills and desperation he'd carried for so long. This felt different, purposeful, meaningful, connected to something larger than his own survival. What do I need to do? Thornfield smiled. First, make the castle livable. The basic systems need updating and some restoration work is required. I've arranged for utility connections and hired a local contractor to handle the major renovations. Second, study Cornelius's notes and begin learning how his device works. Third, when you're ready, reach out to the community. Let them know that the castle is awakening again. After Thornfield left, Noah and Emma spent the day exploring their new home more thoroughly. The castle was larger than it had initially appeared, with room after room revealing new wonders. A conservatory filled with mechanical plants that moved and responded to touch. A map room where the walls showed detailed charts of the surrounding countryside. A music room with an organ that seemed to play itself when Emma approached the keys. But it was in the kitchen that Noah felt most at home. Despite its medieval appearance, the space had been updated with modern conveniences hidden within traditional cabinetry. As he prepared a simple lunch from provisions Thornfield had thoughtfully provided, he found himself imagining cooking for more than just Emma, preparing meals for gatherings, for community events, for families who might come seeking comfort. "Dad, look at this," Emma called from where she'd been examining a collection of photographs on the kitchen mantel. "It's pictures of all the people who used to come to the castle. The photographs showed decades of celebrations, harvest festivals, with long tables groaning under the weight of community potluck dishes, children playing games on the castle grounds, elderly couples dancing to musicians performing in the courtyard. In many of the pictures, Noah could see various members of the Blake family hosting and welcoming, their faces showing the satisfaction of people who had found their purpose. "They look happy," Emma observed. "They do, don't they?" That evening, Noah sat in the workshop reading Cornelius's technical notes while Emma played with the mechanical toys nearby. The memory device was incredibly complex, but the underlying principles were beginning to make sense. It wasn't magic despite its mystical appearance. It was an ingenious combination of crystalline resonance, electromagnetic fields, and what Cornelius called emotional imprinting. The crystals could somehow capture and store not just images or sounds, but the complete sensory and emotional experience of a memory. The brass and copper components created a field that could safely replay those experiences for others, allowing them to feel the presence of departed loved ones without the psychological danger of denial or delusion. "It's like a bridge," Noah murmured, remembering Cornelius's phrase about connecting past and present. "A way to visit the people we love without getting lost in the past." Emma had fallen asleep on a pile of cushions, surrounded by gently glowing, mechanical creatures that seemed to sense her presence and dim their lights in response. Looking at her peaceful face, Noah felt a surge of determination, unlike anything he'd experienced since Sarah's diagnosis. For the first time in 3 years, he had more than just survival to focus on. He had a purpose, a legacy to fulfill, a community to serve. The broken man who had laughed bitterly at a $1 inheritance was transforming into someone who could build bridges between grief and healing. As he carried Emma up to her new bedroom, Noah made a silent promise to Sarah's memory. He would finish what Cornelius had started. He would create a place where families like theirs could find peace with their losses and joy in their continuing love. The castle seemed to approve, settling around them with the contented sounds of ancient stones, finding their rest for another night. 3 weeks into their new life at Weywarden Keep, Noah was beginning to understand why the Blake family had produced so many inventors. The castle itself seemed to inspire creative problem-solving, as if the very stones were infused with generations of ingenuity and determination. He'd spent the morning working with old Pete Mackenzie, a master craftsman from the village who had learned his trade as Cornelius's apprentice 40 years ago. Pete's weathered hands moved with the precision of someone who understood metal and crystal as intimately as Noah understood plumbing and electrical work. "The memory crystal is the heart of the whole system," Pete explained, carefully adjusting. "A brass resonator that would help focus the device's energy. Cornelius spent 20 years perfecting these. Each one has to be tuned to specific emotional frequencies." Noah watched as Pete demonstrated the calibration process, noting how the old craftsman's techniques were part traditional metalworking and part something that seemed closer to art. "How do you tune a crystal to emotions?" "Same way you tune a piano to music. Every feeling has its own vibration, its own harmonic signature. Love, grief, joy, longing. They all resonate at different frequencies. The crystals learn to recognize and amplify those resonances." Emma had become Pete's eager assistant, handing him tools and asking the kind of direct questions that only children could manage. Her curiosity about the memory device had evolved from simple wonder into genuine understanding, and Noah often found her explaining concepts to her stuffed animals with surprising accuracy. "So when someone misses their grandpa," she said seriously, holding a small resonator crystal, "the machine can help them remember the good times without feeling too sad." "Exactly right, little miss. Your great-great-uncle understood that grief isn't something to be cured, it's something to be honored. The machine doesn't take away the sadness, but it helps people remember that love is stronger than loss." That afternoon, While Pete worked on the device's harmonic regulators, Noah tackled the practical aspects of castle restoration. The heating system needed updating, several windows required new glazing, and the electrical connections to the workshop needed to be modernized. It was the kind of work he'd done 1,000 times before, but somehow it felt different when he was improving his own home rather than earning an hourly wage. Emma had claimed the conservatory as her special place, tending to the mechanical plants that Cornelius had created as experiments in combining natural growth with precision engineering. The metal flowers opened and closed with the rhythm of breathing, while crystal leaves chimed softly when touched by the breeze from the open windows. "Dad, I think something's happening with the big crystal," she called from the workshop. Noah found her standing before the memory device's main crystal array, which was glowing more brightly than he'd ever seen it. The warm light pulsed gently, and the air around the machine seemed to shimmer with barely visible energy. "Has it done this before?" "A little bit when I touch the small crystals. But this is different. It's like it's waking up." Pete joined them, studying the display with the experienced eye of someone who had seen Cornelius's early experiments. "Aye, that's a good sign. The crystals are beginning to resonate with the castle's occupants. They're learning your emotional signatures." "That's safe?" "Perfectly safe. Cornelius designed multiple safeguards into the system. The crystals can only record memories that are freely offered, and they can only replay them in ways that promote healing rather than harmful obsession." Noah approached the main control panel, where two hand-shaped indentations waited for activation. According to Cornelius's notes, the device required a conscious, willing connection from someone who understood both the technology and its purpose. "What happens if I touch it?" "Why don't we find out?" Pete suggested. "The machine's nearly complete. Now, all the major components are connected and calibrated. It should be ready for initial testing." Emma moved to stand beside him, her small hand slipping into his free one. "Together, Dad?" Noah felt his heart skip as he looked down at his daughter's trusting face. The memory crystal pulsed more brightly, as if responding to their connection. He thought of Sarah, of the countless moments they'd shared that lived now only in his increasingly fragile memory. What would it mean to preserve those moments, to ensure that Emma could someday experience her mother's love as more than just stories? "Together," he agreed. The moment his palms touched the control interface, the world transformed. Light erupted from the crystal array, not harsh or blinding, but warm and encompassing, like stepping into a summer morning. The workshop around them seemed to fade, replaced by something that was part memory, part dream, and part impossible reality. Noah found himself standing in the hospital room where Emma had been born, but it wasn't quite as he remembered it. The harsh, fluorescent lighting had been replaced by the golden glow of the memory crystals, and the clinical smell of antiseptic was gone, leaving only the scent of roses from the bouquet he'd brought Sarah. And there she was. Sarah sat up in the hospital bed, radiant despite 12 hours of labor, cradling their newborn daughter with the expression of wonder that Noah had carried in his heart for 8 years. Her hair was slightly damp with perspiration, her face flushed with exhaustion and joy, and her eyes, those beautiful green eyes that Emma had inherited, were fixed on their baby with infinite love. "She's perfect," Sarah whispered, "just as she had that day. Look at her tiny fingers. Look at how she's looking at you, Noah. She knows you're her daddy." Noah felt tears streaming down his face as he experienced not just the visual memory, but everything. The overwhelming rush of love and terror that had filled him when he first saw Emma, the sound of Sarah's laugh when their daughter had wrapped her tiny fist around his finger, the weight of responsibility and joy that had settled on his shoulders like a blessing. But this wasn't just Noah's memory. Emma was experiencing it too, seeing herself through her parents' eyes, feeling the absolute love that had surrounded her from the moment of her birth. "I was so small," Emma whispered in wonder, her voice somehow both her 8-year-old self and part of the memory itself, but so strong," Sarah replied, turning to look directly at Emma with eyes full of recognition and love. "You were the strongest, bravest baby I'd ever seen, and you grew up to be exactly who I hoped you'd be, kind and curious and full of light." The memory Sarah reached out as if to touch Emma's face, and though Noah knew this was impossible, he felt his wife's presence as clearly as if she were standing beside them. "I have to go soon," Sarah said gently, her image beginning to fade around the edges. "But I want you both to know that love doesn't end, even when life does. Every time you help someone else heal, every time you choose connection over isolation, every time you remember that joy is stronger than sorrow, that's me living on through both of you." The hospital room began to dissolve, but Sarah's voice remained clear. "Take care of each other and help other families find what you found. Here, that's why Cornelius built this place. That's why you were meant to be here." The crystal light gradually dimmed, returning them to the workshop where Pete watched with understanding eyes. Noah found himself sitting on the floor with Emma in his arms, both of them crying and laughing at the same time. "Did you see her?" Emma asked, her voice filled with wonder. "Did you really see Mommy?" "I saw her," Noah confirmed, his voice hoarse with emotion. "We both did. But how is that possible?" Pete approached slowly, his weathered face gentle with sympathy. "The crystals don't create false visions, lad. They amplify what's already there, the love that connects us across time, the memories that live in our hearts, whether we can access them clearly or not. Cornelius believed that love creates its own kind of energy, one that doesn't fade even after death." Noah looked around the workshop with new understanding. The memory device wasn't about denying death or clinging to the past. It was about recognizing that love creates bonds that transcend physical existence, that the people we've lost continue to live through the ways they've changed us. Other families could experience this too. Aye, if they're ready for it. The machine responds to genuine love and sincere grief. It can't be forced or faked, and it won't work for those who want to use it to avoid accepting loss. But for those who are ready to transform their grief into celebration of love, well, you've seen what's possible. Emma was examining the crystals with new fascination, watching how they continued to glow softly in response to their emotional state. "The castle really is magic, isn't it, Dad?" "The best kind of magic," Noah agreed. "The kind that helps people heal." As evening approached, they climbed back to the main castle, leaving the workshop with its gently humming device to rest until tomorrow. Noah felt changed by the experience, not healed exactly, because grief wasn't something to be cured, but transformed. His love for Sarah was no longer a source of pain, but a source of strength, a reminder of the connections that make life meaningful. That night, as he tucked Emma into her bed surrounded by Cornelius's mechanical toys, she asked the question he'd been expecting. "Can we help other families feel better like we do now?" "That's exactly what we're going to do, Em. That's exactly what we're going to do." Outside the castle windows, the countryside stretched toward distant villages where other families struggled with their own losses. Tomorrow, Noah would begin reaching out to the community, letting them know that Weywarden Keep was ready to fulfill its destiny as a place of healing and hope. But tonight, he sat by Emma's bedside until she fell asleep, feeling Sarah's presence in the warm castle air and knowing that they had finally found their true home. The restoration manual that Noah found in Cornelius's desk was unlike any technical document he'd ever encountered. Written in his great-uncle's careful script, it read less like engineering instructions and more like a love letter to future generations. Equal parts practical guidance and philosophical meditation on the nature of memory, loss, and healing. The memory preservation device, Cornelius had written, is not merely a machine but a sacred trust. Each component must be crafted with the understanding that it will touch the most tender places of human hearts. Work with patience, work with love, and remember that you are building bridges between sorrow and joy. Noah had been studying the manual for 3 days, cross-referencing its instructions with the partially completed device in the workshop. Emma had appointed herself his research assistant, reading aloud from Cornelius's notes while Noah worked. On the intricate calibrations required for each crystal resonator, the work was unlike anything he'd done before, requiring not just technical skill but something closer to intuition. Each crystal had to be tuned not just to specific frequencies, but to the emotional harmonics that would allow it to safely capture and replay human memories. Too little resonance and the memories would be vague and incomplete. Too much and the experience could become overwhelming or even harmful. "Listen to this part, Dad," Emma said, reading from a section about the device's safeguards. "The crystals are designed to recognize the difference between healthy remembrance and destructive obsession. They will only activate for those who seek to honor their loved ones rather than deny their absence." "Smart design," Noah murmured, carefully adjusting a harmonic regulator. Cornelius thought of everything. He really wanted to make sure nobody got hurt by being too sad, didn't he? He did. He understood that grief can be dangerous if it's not processed in healthy ways. The memory of their first successful test 3 days ago still filled Noah with wonder. The experience of seeing Sarah again, of feeling her presence so vividly, had been transformative, not because it allowed him to deny her death, but because it reminded him that their love story continued even without her physical presence. Emma had been profoundly affected too. She'd spent hours drawing pictures of the memory they'd shared, creating what she called feeling maps that showed how the crystal light had made different emotions visible as colors and patterns. Her drawings were remarkably sophisticated for an 8-year-old, suggesting that her exposure to the memory device was awakening capabilities Noah hadn't known she possessed. "Dad, I think the machine is teaching me things," she'd said the day before, showing him a drawing that perfectly captured the harmonic patterns he'd seen in Cornelius's technical diagrams. Now, as Noah worked on the final connections between the crystal array and the brass resonance chambers, he found himself thinking about the broader implications of what they were building. The device wasn't just a personal tool for their own healing. It was meant to serve the entire community, to help other families find peace with their losses. Old Pete arrived at midday, carrying a wooden case containing the final components. They needed precision-crafted copper conductors that would complete the device's electromagnetic field generators. "These are the last pieces," Pete announced, opening the case to reveal gleaming metal components that seemed to sing with their own inner music. "Took me 40 years to learn how to craft them properly. Each one has to be tuned to the exact resonance of the crystal it'll be paired with." Noah watched in fascination as Pete demonstrated the installation process. The old craftsman's hands moved with the precision of a surgeon and the confidence of someone who understood his materials at a molecular level. "How did you learn all this? Did Cornelius teach you about crystal resonance and harmonic frequencies?" "Aye, but he learned it from his father, who learned it from his father before him. The Blake family has been working with what most folks would call impossible for generations. They just called it engineering with heart." Emma had been quietly observing Pete's work, but now she spoke up with the directness that never failed, to surprise adults. "Are you sad that Cornelius died before he could finish this?" Pete's hands stilled for a moment, and his weathered face softened. "I am, little miss. He was a good man who spent his life trying to help others, but seeing it finished now, knowing it'll do the work he intended, that eases the sadness considerable. Will you use it too to see someone you miss? Perhaps someday. My Martha passed 5 years ago, and there are conversations I'd like to have with her again. But first, we need to make sure it's working perfectly for other folks." As Pete completed the final connections, the memory device began to emit a different quality of light, steadier, more focused, somehow more alive. The crystals pulsed in harmonic synchronization, creating patterns of light that seemed to dance through the workshop air. "It's ready," Pete announced with satisfaction, ready for its true purpose. That evening, Noah called the number Thornfield had given him for Mrs. Henderson, the local historian who had known Cornelius and understood the castle's role in the community. Her voice over the phone was warm but cautious, clearly curious about the new residents of Weywarden Keep, but uncertain about their intentions. "We'd like to invite people to visit," Noah explained, "to see what we've restored and to learn about what the castle can offer now. And what exactly can it offer?" Noah chose his words carefully. "A place for families dealing with loss to find. In comfort and community. Cornelius left us something that I think could help people heal." There was a long pause before Mrs. Henderson responded. "There are quite a few families in the area who could use that kind of help. The Weatherbys lost their youngest son in Afghanistan last year. The Kowalski's daughter was killed by a drunk driver 6 months ago. Old Thomas Brennan has been lost since his wife died of cancer." Each name hit Noah like a physical blow. These weren't abstract cases. They were real people struggling with the same devastating grief he'd carried for 3 years. Would they be willing to visit, to see what we've built? I think they might be, especially if they knew it came from someone who understands their pain. They arranged for a small gathering the following weekend. Just a few families, nothing overwhelming, a chance for people to see the restored castle and learn about the memory device without pressure or expectations. After hanging up, Noah found Emma in the conservatory, reading a storybook to the mechanical flowers that seemed to respond to the sound of her voice by opening their metallic petals wider. "We're going to have visitors soon," he told her. "Families who are sad like we used to be." Emma looked up from her book with serious eyes. "Will the machine help them feel better?" "I hope so. But even if it doesn't work for everyone, at least they'll know they're not alone." "That's important too," Emma said, with the wisdom of a child who had learned early that isolation makes grief harder to bear. "When I was really missing Mommy, the worst part was thinking nobody understood how it felt." That night, Noah worked late in the workshop, making final adjustments to the memory device and reviewing Cornelius's notes about conducting healing sessions. The manual included detailed guidance about creating safe emotional environments, recognizing when someone wasn't ready for the experience, and helping people process what they encountered in the crystal memories. "Remember," Cornelius had written, "you are not a therapist or a spiritual guide. You are a facilitator of connection. Trust the crystals to provide what each person needs, and trust the people to know their own hearts. The machine works through love, not through force." As Noah prepared to head upstairs, he noticed that the memory crystals were glowing more brightly than usual, pulsing with warm light that seemed to fill the workshop with peaceful energy. He placed his hand on the main control interface, not to activate a memory session, but simply to connect with the device that had become so central to their new life. For just a moment, he felt Sarah's presence again, not as a visible apparition, but as a warm certainty that she approved of what they were building here. The memory device wasn't about bringing back the dead, but about celebrating the ways that love transcends physical existence. Tomorrow, they would begin sharing that gift with others. Tomorrow, Weywarden Keep would start fulfilling its destiny as a place where broken hearts could find healing and isolated souls could discover community. Noah climbed the stone stairs to the main castle, feeling the weight of responsibility and the lightness of purpose in equal measure. Behind him, the workshop hummed quietly, with the energy of completed work and infinite possibility. Thornfield's unexpected return came on a grey Thursday morning, just 2 days before the first community gathering Noah had planned. The lawyer's usually composed demeanor seemed strained as he climbed out of his vintage Bentley, carrying a leather briefcase that looked heavier than usual. Emma was in the garden, teaching the mechanical flowers a song she'd learned at her new school, when she spotted him through the conservatory windows. "Dad, Mr. Thornfield is back, and he looks worried." Noah found the elderly lawyer standing, in the castle's entrance hall, studying Cornelius's portrait with an expression that mixed respect with something that might have been regret. "Mr. Blake, we need to discuss something rather urgent regarding your inheritance. Is there a problem? Have we done something wrong with the restoration?" "Quite the opposite, I'm afraid." Thornfield set his briefcase on the hall table and withdrew a thick legal document. "You've done too well. Word has spread about the castle's restoration and your work on Cornelius's device. That has attracted attention from some very powerful people." Noah felt his stomach drop. "What kind of attention?" "The kind that comes with very large checks and very specific demands." Thornfield handed him the document. "Blackstone Development Group. They're offering to purchase Weywarden Keep for $25 million. The number hit Noah like a physical blow. $25 million would solve every financial worry he'd ever had, would ensure Emma's future through college and beyond, would provide security beyond his wildest dreams. "But we just got here. We're just starting to—" "There's more." Thornfield's voice was heavy with reluctance. "I've been doing research into the legal structure of your inheritance, and I've discovered something that Cornelius apparently chose not to mention in his initial instructions." Emma had joined them, sensing the serious nature of the conversation, even if she didn't understand its implications. She slipped her hand into Noah's, providing the kind of wordless support that had become second nature between them. "What kind?" "Of something. The inheritance comes with a choice that must be made within 90 days of taking possession. You can keep the castle and complete Cornelius's work, accepting the responsibilities and limitations that come with that choice. Or you can sell the property and receive a substantial financial settlement that would free you from any obligations to the estate." Noah stared at the legal document, his mind reeling. "You're saying we have to choose between keeping our home and financial security?" "In essence, yes. Cornelius structured the inheritance this way intentionally. He wanted to ensure that whoever inherited the castle did so out of genuine commitment to its purpose, not simply because they had no other options." "But why didn't you tell us this before?" Thornfield's composure cracked slightly. "Because I hoped it wouldn't be necessary. Cornelius left specific instructions that the choice should only be presented if someone showed serious interest in purchasing the property. For 50 years, no one had. But your restoration work, the stories about Cornelius's device beginning to function again, they've created interest in certain circles." Noah felt the ground shifting beneath him, the security and purpose he'd found at Weywarden Keep suddenly seeming as fragile as morning mist. "What happens if we choose to sell?" "Blackstone has plans to convert the property into a luxury resort. The castle would be preserved for its historical value, but the workshop, the memory device, everything Cornelius built would be removed and presumably destroyed. And if we choose to stay, you commit to completing Cornelius's work and serving the community as the Blake family has always done. But you also accept certain financial limitations. The trust fund provides for basic maintenance and living expenses, but you'll never be wealthy in any conventional sense." Emma had been listening with the focused attention she brought to important adult conversations. Now she spoke up with characteristic directness. "If we sell the castle, what happens to the machine that helps sad people?" "It would be gone, sweetheart," Thornfield admitted, "and the castle would become a place for wealthy people to vacation rather than a place where families can heal." "That seems wrong." "Many things in this world seem wrong, young lady. The question is what we're willing to do about it." Noah found himself thinking of the families Mrs. Henderson had mentioned, the Weatherbys, the Kowalskis, Thomas Brennan, all the people who were struggling with losses and might find comfort in what he and Emma had built here. $25 million would change their lives, but would it be worth abandoning the people who needed what Weywarden Keep could offer? How long do we have to decide? Blackstone wants an answer within 2 weeks. They're motivated buyers. That afternoon, Noah walked the castle grounds alone, while Emma played in the workshop with the mechanical toys that had become her favorite companions. The offer from Blackstone weighed on his mind like a physical burden. $25 million. Financial security for Emma's entire future. College, medical care, opportunities he could never provide on a handyman's income. But as he stood in the spot where he'd first seen the castle rising from the mist, he remembered the wonder in Emma's eyes, the way her breathing had improved. In the clean air, the joy she'd found in finally having a real home. More than that, he remembered the moment in the memory device when Sarah had spoken directly to Emma, when they'd both felt her presence so clearly. Take care of each other and help other families find what you've found here. That evening, Mrs. Henderson called with the final arrangements for the weekend gathering. "I have 5 families confirmed," she said, her voice warm with anticipation. "They're all quite eager to see what you've accomplished at the castle." "Mrs. Henderson, what would you say if I told you someone wanted to buy Weywarden Keep and turn it into a resort?" The silence that followed was so long that Noah wondered. "If the connection had been lost, I'd say that would be a tragedy," she finally answered. "This community has been waiting 50 years for the castle to fulfill its purpose again. There are people here who need what you're offering, Mr. Blake. Not everyone can be healed by conventional therapy or support groups. Some kinds of grief require something more extraordinary." After dinner, Noah found Emma in the library, carefully examining one of Cornelius's technical drawings. She'd become remarkably adept at understanding the memory device's operation, often catching details that Noah missed. "Em, we need to talk about something important." She set down the drawing and gave him her full attention. Her green eyes, so much like Sarah's, serious and alert. "Some people want to buy our castle and turn it into a place for rich people to stay on vacation. If we sold it to them, we'd have enough money to buy anything we wanted, to live anywhere we wanted, to never worry about bills again." Emma considered this information with the careful thought she brought to all serious matters. "But what about the machine? What about helping the sad families? If we sold the castle, all of that would be gone. And what about us? Would we still be together?" "Of course, no matter what happens, we'll always be together." Emma nodded slowly, then asked the question that cut straight to the heart of everything. "What do you think Mommy would want us to do?" Noah felt tears prick his eyes as he remembered Sarah's voice in the memory crystal. "Every time you help someone else heal, every time you choose connection over isolation, every time you remember that joy is stronger than sorrow, that's me living on through both of you. I think she'd want us to help people," he said quietly. "Then that's what we should do." Emma's voice carried the certainty of childhood wisdom. Money can't make us happy if other people are still sad, and we could have helped them. That night, Noah stood in the workshop, surrounded by the gentle glow of the memory crystals. The device hummed quietly, ready to provide comfort and healing to the families who would visit this weekend. He thought about the choice facing them: security versus service, wealth versus purpose, safety versus the unknown challenges of fulfilling Cornelius's mission. He also thought about the families he'd known in foster care, the ones who had chosen safety over connection, comfort over commitment. They'd been secure, but had they been happy? Had they made the world better by their presence in it? Sarah's ring was warm on his finger as he made his decision. Some inheritances couldn't be measured in dollars. Some legacies were worth more than security. Tomorrow he would call Thornfield and decline Blackstone's offer. This weekend he would open Weywarden Keep to the community it was meant to serve. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he and Emma would face them together, building something that mattered more than money. The memory crystals pulsed brighter, as if approving his choice, and for a moment Noah could have sworn he heard Sarah's laugh, echoing through the workshop, warm, loving, and infinitely proud. The morning of the first community gathering dawned clear and bright, with autumn sunlight streaming through the castle's tall windows and painting golden patterns on the ancient stone floors. Noah woke before dawn, his stomach churning with a mixture of anticipation and terror that reminded him of Emma's birth, the same overwhelming sense that everything was about to change forever. In the workshop, the memory device hummed with quiet readiness, its crystals glowing softly as if aware that this day would mark its true beginning. Noah had spent the previous evening making final adjustments, guided by Cornelius's detailed notes and old Pete's patient instruction. Everything was calibrated perfectly, every safeguard tested and confirmed, but technical readiness was only part of what this day required. Emma appeared in the workshop doorway, already dressed in her best dress, a blue sundress that brought out her eyes and made her look older than her 8 years. In her hands, she carried something that made Noah's breath catch. Sarah's locket, the one with Emma's baby picture inside, that he'd worn close to his heart for 3 years. "I want to put this in the machine," she said with the quiet determination that always surprised him. "Like you showed me in Cornelius's book. The machine needs something from our family to work its best, and this has both you and me and Mommy all together." Noah knelt to her level, studying her serious face. "Are you sure, Em? That locket is precious. Once it becomes part of the machine, it'll always stay here. I'm sure Mommy would want it to help other families the way she helped us." Emma's voice carried the wisdom of someone who had learned early that the most meaningful gifts require sacrifice. "Besides, we don't need the locket to remember her. She's already in here." She touched her chest above her heart. Together they approached the memory device's central chamber, where Cornelius had designed a special receptacle for what he called anchor objects, personal items that would help focus the machine's ability to resonate with genuine love and loss. Noah opened the crystal-lined compartment with reverent care and placed Sarah's locket inside, where it immediately began to glow with warm, welcoming light. The effect was immediate and profound. The entire device seemed to come alive in a new way, its harmonics deepening and its crystal array pulsing with patterns that looked like heartbeats made visible. The workshop filled with a sense of presence that felt unmistakably like Sarah's. Loving approval. "She's here," Emma whispered, her eyes wide with wonder. "She's really here with us." Old Pete arrived an hour later, carrying a wooden box that contained his own contribution to the day. Precision-crafted brass plaques that would help visitors understand what they were experiencing in the memory chamber. Each plaque bore an inscription in Cornelius's careful script: "Love is the bridge between what was and what will be." "These go beside each crystal station," Pete explained, showing Noah how to mount them. Cornelius believed people needed to understand that they weren't trying to bring back the dead, but to celebrate the connections that never truly die. Mrs. Henderson was the first to arrive, bringing with her a basket of fresh bread and the kind of practical warmth that seemed to be her specialty. She studied the restored castle with obvious approval, running her fingers along stonework that Pete had painstakingly cleaned and repaired. "It feels like itself again," she said with satisfaction, "like the castle has been holding its breath for 50 years and can finally exhale." The first family arrived at 10 o'clock. The Weatherbys, whose 20-year-old son Michael had died. In Afghanistan the previous year, Tom Weatherby was a big man made smaller by grief, while his wife Janet clutched a folded flag and a photograph of a young soldier with his father's eyes and his mother's smile. Noah felt his own grief echo in recognition as he welcomed them into the castle's main hall. The Weatherbys moved with the careful restraint of people who had learned to hold their pain close, afraid that any strong emotion might shatter their fragile equilibrium. "We're not sure what we're hoping for," Janet said quietly. "Mrs. Henderson said you might have something that could help, but we've tried counseling, we've tried support groups. Sometimes traditional approaches aren't enough," Noah replied gently. "What we've built here is different. It's not therapy exactly, but it's not mysticism either. It's a way to experience the love that continues even after physical separation." Emma had positioned herself as the unofficial greeter, offering the visitors mechanical toys to examine and explaining how the castle's various rooms had been restored. Her natural ease with grief, the hard-won wisdom of a child who had processed loss early, seemed to comfort the adults in ways that surprised Noah. The Kowalskis arrived next. Maria and Stefan, whose 16-year-old daughter Anna had been killed by a drunk driver 6 months earlier. They carried with them a violin case. Anna had been first chair in her school orchestra, and a graduation photo that would never be matched by college pictures. Thomas Brennan came alone, a 70-year-old man whose wife of 45 years had died of cancer the previous spring. He walked with the careful steps of someone whose balance had been forever altered by loss, carrying a small photo and what looked like a love letter worn soft from handling. The final visitors were the Chens, Noah's former neighbors from the trailer park. Mrs. Chen had lost her elderly mother the year before, and the grief had left her unable to sleep, unable to find peace with the traditional Chinese funeral rites that were supposed to bring closure. As in Yi, Noah led the group through the castle, showing them the restored rooms and explaining the history of the Blake family's commitment to community service. He felt the weight of responsibility settling heavily on his shoulders. These people had come seeking something that conventional healing couldn't provide. What if the memory device didn't work for them? What if their loss was too raw, their grief too complex for even Cornelius's invention to address? The machine doesn't take away pain, he explained as they gathered in the library. It doesn't pretend that death isn't real or that we should forget our loved ones. Instead, it helps us remember that love creates connections that transcend physical existence. Emma had taken charge of explaining the technical aspects, using the simplified language she'd developed for her stuffed animals, but with remarkable accuracy about the device's operation. The crystals learn about your special person by feeling how much you love them. Then they help you visit with that love in a safe place where it can't hurt too much. When they finally descended to the workshop, the memory device was humming with quiet anticipation. The crystal array glowed more brightly than Noah had ever seen it, and the air itself seemed to shimmer with potential. "It feels them," Emma said, softly, watching how the crystals responded to the presence of the grieving families. "It knows they need help." Noah looked around at the faces of the people who had trusted them enough to come here. Faces marked by loss, but also by hope, by the desperate need to believe that their loved ones continued to exist in some meaningful way. Tom Weatherby clutched his son's photo. Maria Kowalski held Anna's violin case. Thomas Brennan's weathered hands shook slightly as he touched his wife's letter. "Who would like to go first?" Noah asked gently. The silence stretched for a long moment before Thomas Brennan stepped forward. "I've been married to my Eleanor for 45 years, he said, his voice steady despite the emotion behind it. "If there's any chance I can tell her goodbye properly, I need to take it." As Noah began the careful process of calibrating the memory device for its first real test, he felt Sarah's presence more strongly than ever. The locket at the machine's heart pulsed with warm light, and he knew with absolute certainty that whatever happened next, they were fulfilling the destiny that had brought them to Weywarden Keep. The real work was about to begin. Thomas Brennan's weathered hands trembled as he approached the memory device's control interface. The old man had served in Vietnam, raised 3 children, and built a successful carpentry business from nothing. But Noah could see that this moment required a different kind of courage than any he'd faced before. "What do I need to do?" Thomas asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Just place your hands here." Noah guided him to the palm-shaped indentations in the control panel. "Think about Eleanor, not about losing her, but about loving her. The crystals respond to joy, not grief." Emma stood beside them, her small hand resting gently on Thomas's arm in a gesture of support that seemed far beyond her 8 years. "Remember your favorite day with her," she said softly. "The machine works best with happy memories." Thomas closed his eyes, and immediately the crystal array began to glow more brightly. The light started as a warm golden shimmer, but quickly deepened into something richer, more complex. Colors that seemed to have emotional textures, patterns that moved like living music. "I'm thinking about our wedding day," Thomas said, wonder creeping into his voice. "But not just the ceremony, the morning after, when we woke up in that little cabin by the lake. Eleanor made coffee that was terrible, but she was so proud of it, and I told her it was the best coffee I'd ever tasted because it was the first coffee she'd made as my wife." The workshop around them began to fade, replaced by something that was part memory, part dream, part impossible reality. Noah found himself standing in a rustic cabin filled with morning sunlight, where a young woman with silver-streaked hair was laughing as she served coffee from a dented percolator. But this wasn't just Thomas's memory. Somehow, impossibly, it was Eleanor's too. The crystals had captured not just one perspective, but the complete emotional reality of that moment, showing how love looks from both sides. "Tommy," Eleanor said, turning toward Thomas with eyes full of affection and gentle teasing, "you're such a liar. This coffee is awful and we both know it." But her smile was radiant, and the love between them filled the memory space like sunlight. Noah watched in amazement as the elderly Thomas stepped forward to embrace his young wife, both of them somehow existing in the same impossible moment. The grieving widower and the newlywed, separated by decades, but united by love that had never diminished. "I miss you so much, Ellie," Thomas whispered, tears streaming down his face. "I don't know how to live without you." "Oh, my darling," Eleanor replied, her voice carrying all the warmth and wisdom of their 45 years together. "You're not living without me. You're living with all the love we built together. Every time you tell one of our stories, every time you help someone the way we used to help our neighbors, every time you remember that we were blessed, that's me, living on through you." The memory. Eleanor reached out to touch Thomas's face, and though Noah knew this was impossible, the love in the gesture was absolutely real. "You gave me the most beautiful life, Tommy. Now you need to keep living beautifully for both of us." As the cabin scene began to fade, Eleanor's voice remained clear and strong. "Take care of yourself, my love. And when it's time for us to be together again, I'll have fresh coffee waiting, properly made this time." The crystal light gradually dimmed, returning them to the workshop where Thomas sat in wonder, his face wet with tears, but somehow transformed. The crushing weight of grief that had bowed his shoulders seemed to have lifted, replaced by something lighter but no less profound. "She was really there," he said, his voice filled with amazement. "That was really her, wasn't it?" "The love was real," Noah confirmed gently. "The crystals don't create false experiences. They amplify what already exists in your heart." The other families had watched Thomas's session with rapt attention, and now Maria Kowalski stepped forward, clutching her daughter's violin case. Could I hear her play one more time?" Noah nodded, helping Maria approach the memory interface. "Think about a time when you felt most proud of her, most connected to who she was as a person." Maria's hands shook as she placed them on the control panel. "Anna's senior recital," she whispered. "She played Pachelbel's canon, and she was so nervous beforehand, but when she started playing, the crystal array erupted in a symphony of light that seemed to dance in harmony with music only they could hear." The workshop transformed into a concert hall where a beautiful teenager with her mother's dark eyes and her father's gentle smile stood on stage, violin poised with perfect technique. But as Anna began to play, the memory expanded beyond that. Single performance. The crystals showed years of practice sessions, small triumphs and frustrations, the development of a young musician who played not for perfection, but for the pure joy of creating beauty. "Mama," Anna said during a pause in the music, her image shimmering with crystal light. Don't cry for the music I won't play. Celebrate all the music we made together. Every time someone hears Peshilbel's canon, every time you remember how proud you were, every time Dad hums the songs I used to practice. That's me, living on in the world. Stefan Kowalski, who had been standing silently beside his wife, suddenly stepped forward. Anna, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I was working so much. Sorry I missed so many of your concerts. Sorry I never told you enough how proud I was. Papa. Anna's memory voice was gentle but firm. You gave me the discipline to practice and the strength to perform. You were proud. I could see it in your eyes even when you didn't say it. And all those hours you worked were because you loved our family. I never doubted that. As Anna's memory began to fade, she played one final phrase of Pachelbel's canon, the notes seeming to hang in the air long after the crystal light dimmed. Maria and Stefan stood together, holding each other and weeping, but their tears seemed lighter somehow, mixed with joy rather than drowning in pure sorrow. One by one, the other families experienced their own connections. Janet Weatherby held her son Michael as he appeared in his army uniform, not as the fallen soldier she'd mourned, but as the proud young man who had chosen to serve others. Mrs. Chen spoke with her mother in the garden they had tended together, receiving the blessing and peace that traditional funeral rites had failed to provide. Each session was different, but all carried the same essential message. Love creates bonds that transcend physical existence, and those we've lost continue to live through the ways they've changed us. As the afternoon wore on, the memory device seemed to grow stronger, its crystals glowing with increasing warmth and complexity. Emma moved between the families, like a young priestess, offering comfort and explaining the experience with the natural wisdom of someone who had learned early that love is stronger than loss. You see, she told Mrs. Chen, as the elderly woman emerged from her session with tear-streaked cheeks but peaceful eyes. The people we love don't really go away. They just change into a different kind of being with us. Noah felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they had accomplished. In a single afternoon, they had helped 5 families transform their relationship with grief, had given them tools to celebrate their loved ones rather than simply mourn their absence. But as the last family prepared to leave, Thomas Brennan approached Noah with an expression of deep gratitude, mixed with something that looked like concern. "This is a miracle, what you've built here," he said quietly. But miracles attract attention. Word is going to spread about what happened today, and not everyone will understand what this place is really about. Noah felt a chill of recognition. Thomas was right. They had opened something here that would draw people from far beyond their small community. Some would come seeking genuine healing, but others might come seeking sensation or profit. As the families departed, each carrying with them a sense of peace that hadn't existed when they arrived, Noah realized that their real challenges were just beginning. They had proven that Cornelius's device worked, that Weywarden Keep could fulfill its destiny as a place of healing. Now they had to figure out how to protect it. Word spread through the community with the speed that only truly meaningful news can achieve. Within a week of the first gathering, Noah's phone was ringing constantly with requests from families throughout the region who had heard about the miracle machine at Weywarden Keep. Some calls came from genuine seekers of healing, but others carried the sharp edge of commercial interest or sensationalistic curiosity. Emma had become fascinated by the guest registry that Mrs. Henderson had suggested they keep, a simple leather-bound book where visitors could sign their names and leave. Messages about their experience. Already, it contained testimonials that would have seemed impossible just days before. "Thomas and Eleanor Brennan," she read aloud, as Noah worked on calibrating the memory device for their next session. "Thank you for helping us remember that love is stronger than goodbye. Maria, Stefan, and Anna Kowalski, our daughter's music, lives on in our hearts and in the world. The pain is still there, but now it's mixed with joy." Janet and Tom Weatherby. Michael came home today. Not the way we expected, but in the way we needed most. Each entry filled Noah with a mixture of pride and apprehension. They were doing something important here, something that genuinely helped people heal from devastating losses. But success brought its own challenges. The first warning sign came. When Thornfield arrived unannounced on a Tuesday morning, his usually calm demeanor replaced by obvious agitation. "We have a problem," he announced without preamble. "Blackstone Development has increased their offer to $35 million, and they're not accepting your refusal as final." Noah felt his stomach drop. "What do you mean they're not accepting it?" "They've hired investigators to look into the legal structure of your inheritance. They're claiming that Cornelius didn't have the right to place such restrictive conditions on the estate, that forcing you to choose between wealth and property constitutes coercion." Emma looked up from where she'd been teaching one of the mechanical toys a new game. "Are they trying to take our castle away?" "They're trying to find a legal way to force a sale," Thornfield confirmed grimly. "And they have resources that make them very dangerous opponents. But why do they want it so badly? There must be other properties they could develop." Thornfield exchanged a meaningful look with Noah. "Because word has leaked about what you've accomplished with the memory device. There are people who see great profit in the technology Cornelius developed, not for healing, but for entertainment, for tourism, for purposes that would pervert everything he intended." The thought of Cornelius's memory device being turned into some kind of theme park attraction made Noah feel physically sick. They can't just steal it, can they? They can't steal the castle, but they can make life very difficult for you. Legal challenges, zoning disputes, tax complications. There are many ways to pressure someone into selling. That afternoon brought another complication. A television. News crew from the regional station arrived unannounced, having somehow learned about the mysterious healing center operating at Weywarden Keep. The reporter, a polished woman in her 30s, seemed more interested in sensational angles than genuine understanding. "Is it true that you claim to communicate with the dead?" she asked, pointing her microphone at Noah like a weapon. "We don't claim to communicate with anyone," Noah replied carefully. "We've restored a device that helps people process their memories in a healthy way. But witnesses say they've seen deceased family members, had conversations with people who died years ago. How do you explain that?" Emma appeared at Noah's side with the fearless directness that never failed to surprise adults. "It's not talking to dead people," she said matter-of-factly. "It's remembering that love doesn't die. The machine just helps you feel it better." The reporter's eyes lit up with obvious interest in interviewing a child about supernatural phenomena. But Noah quickly stepped between them. "I think that's enough questions for today." As the news crew departed, Noah realized that their peaceful existence at Weywarden Keep was about to end. The story would air within days, bringing attention they weren't prepared to handle. More reporters would come, followed by curiosity seekers, followed by people who wanted to exploit what they'd built. That evening, as Noah sat in the workshop making adjustments to the memory device, he found himself facing the same question that had plagued him since Blackstone's first offer. How do you protect something precious from a world that sees everything in terms of profit and loss? Old Pete arrived just as the sun was setting, carrying news that confirmed Noah's worst fears. "Word's gotten out in the village about the television people," he said grimly. "There are already strangers asking questions at the pub, offering money for information about what goes on up here." "What kind of strangers?" "The kind that work for development companies. The kind that specialize in finding ways to acquire property that isn't supposed to be for sale." Emma had been unusually quiet during dinner, but now she approached Noah with the serious expression that meant she'd been thinking hard about something important. "Dad, what if we invited all the families to come live here with us?" "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "Like a real community. The castle is big enough for lots of families, and if we all lived here together, it would be harder for the bad people to take it away from us." Noah felt a surge of pride at his daughter's insight. "That's actually not a bad idea, Em, but it would be a big change for everyone." Big changes aren't always bad, she said with the wisdom of someone who had learned that lesson early. Sometimes they're exactly what people need. As if summoned by their conversation, the phone rang. Mrs. Henderson's voice carried urgent concern. "Noah, I've just heard from Thomas Brennan. He says there are people in town claiming you're running some kind of cult up there, that you're taking advantage of grieving families. They're talking about calling in state authorities to investigate." Noah closed his eyes, feeling the walls closing in around the peaceful life they'd built at Weywarden Keep. What kind of people? The kind that work for Blackstone Development, I'd guess. They're spreading rumors, offering money for stories about strange goings-on at the castle. Some folks are starting to get nervous. After hanging up, Noah stood in the castle's great hall, looking at the portraits of his ancestors who had faced their own challenges in preserving the Blake family legacy. Each generation had found ways to serve their community while protecting what was essential about their mission. Now, it was his turn to find that balance. "Emma," he called, making a decision that felt both terrifying and absolutely right. "How would you feel about having a very big family?" She appeared at the top of the grand staircase, her face lighting up with understanding. "You mean, invite everyone to live here for real?" "I mean, invite everyone who understands what this place is really about. The Weatherbys, the Kowalskis, Thomas Brennan, Mrs. Chen, anyone who wants to help protect what we've built and keep it true to Cornelius's vision." Emma's smile was radiant. "Like a castle full of families who take care of each other?" "Exactly like that." As Noah began making phone calls to the families who had experienced healing at Weywarden Keep, he realized that they weren't just preserving Cornelius's legacy. They were expanding it, creating something even more powerful than one man's invention. They were building a community united by the understanding that love transcends loss, that healing happens best when people support each other, and that some things are worth protecting, no matter the cost. The battle for Weywarden Keep was about to begin, but they wouldn't be fighting it alone. 6 months after the first community gathering, Weywarden Keep had transformed into something Cornelius Blake could never have imagined, but would have absolutely approved of. The castle now housed 12 families who had come seeking healing and stayed to build something unprecedented, an intentional community united by their understanding of loss and their commitment to helping others navigate grief. Thomas Brennan had been the first to accept Noah's invitation, moving into the castle's east wing and immediately setting up a carpentry workshop where he taught traditional woodworking to anyone interested. His craftsmanship had been essential in converting unused rooms into comfortable family apartments while preserving the castle's historical character. The Weatherbys had followed, with Tom taking over maintenance of the grounds and Janet establishing a memorial garden where families could plant flowers or trees in memory of their loved ones. The Kowalskis had brought Anna's violin collection, creating a music room where Stefan taught lessons, and Maria organized concerts that drew audiences from throughout the region. Mrs. Chen had moved her entire extended family to the castle, creating a multi-generational household that brought the energy of children and the wisdom of elders to the community. Her grandchildren had become Emma's closest friends, and her cooking had transformed the castle's great hall into a place where communal dinners created new traditions every night. The memory device had evolved too, its crystals somehow growing, stronger as more families contributed their own anchor objects, wedding rings, photographs, musical instruments, letters, all the tangible remnants of love that had transcended loss. The device now created experiences so nuanced and powerful that grief counselors from across the country came to study its effects. But the most significant change was in the guest registry, which had grown from a single leather-bound book to an entire library of testimonials from families who had found healing at Weywarden Keep. Emma, now 9 and wise beyond her years, had appointed herself the keeper of these stories, reading them aloud during community meetings and maintaining correspondence with families who had returned to their own homes, carrying the castle's lessons with them. "The Hendersons from Portland," she read, during their weekly gathering in the Great Hall. "We came broken by the loss of our son in a car accident. We left understanding that his love travels with us wherever we go. Thank you for showing us that. Grief is love with nowhere to go and helping us find new places to put it. The Williams family from Chicago. Our daughter's battle with leukemia taught us about courage, but we needed Weywarden Keep to teach us about joy. The memory device helped us remember not just that she died, but how beautifully she lived." Noah looked around the Great Hall at the faces of the families who had chosen to make the castle their permanent home. Children played with Cornelius's mechanical toys, while adults discussed plans for expanding the memorial garden. Teenagers helped elderly community members with technology while learning traditional crafts in return. It was exactly the kind of intergenerational community that seemed impossible in the modern world, but felt completely natural within these ancient walls. Blackstone Development had eventually given up their legal challenges, finding it impossible to pressure an entire community of determined families who had lawyers, accountants, teachers, and craftsmen among their number. The attempt to paint Weywarden Keep as a dangerous cult had failed when reporters discovered a thriving community where children laughed, families supported each other, and genuine healing took place. Thornfield visited monthly now. His role evolved from estate manager to community advisor. His reports to the Blake Estate trustees consistently emphasized how far beyond Cornelius's original vision the castle had grown while staying absolutely true to his fundamental purpose. "You've created something remarkable here," he told Noah during his most recent visit. "A place where people don't just visit to heal, they stay to help others heal. That's what true community looks like." The television story had aired, bringing exactly the kind of sensational coverage Noah had feared, but the community had weathered it by simply being themselves. When reporters came looking for supernatural claims or cult-like behavior, they found families doing homework together, sharing meals, and supporting each other through ordinary struggles as well as extraordinary losses. Emma had become something of a spokesperson for the community. Her natural ease with both grief and joy, helping skeptical visitors understand what Weywarden Keep was really about. She conducted tours with the confidence of someone who had never known anything but home. "This is where people come when they need to remember that love is stronger than sadness," she would explain to visitors, leading them through the castle with the pride of someone who knew she was part of something important. "My dad and I came here when we were very sad about my mum dying, and the castle helped us remember that she's still with us in all the ways that matter." The memorial chamber had become the heart of the community's mission, hosting sessions for visiting families, while also serving as a place where residents could process their ongoing grief. The device had somehow learned to recognize the difference between first-time visitors who needed gentle introduction to its capabilities and community members who could handle more complex experiences. Noah often found himself in the workshop, late at night, not working on the memory device, but simply sitting in quiet appreciation of what they had built. Sarah's locket still glowed at the machine's heart, and he often felt her presence during these peaceful moments, not as a supernatural visitation, but as the deep certainty that she would be proud of the life he and Emma had created. On the anniversary of their arrival at Weywarden Keep, the community held a celebration that drew families from across the region. The memorial garden was in full bloom, the music room filled with Anna Kowalski's compositions, played by Stefan's students, and the great hall hosted a feast that would have made Cornelius's ancestors proud. Emma had asked to make a speech during the celebration, and she stood before the assembled crowd with the poise of someone who had learned to speak from the heart. "When my dad and I first came here, we thought we were just getting a house," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. "But we got a family instead. Not just the people who live here, but all the families who come to visit and all the people who love them. The castle taught us that when someone you love dies, you don't lose them. You just have to learn new ways to be with them. As applause filled the ancient hall, Noah felt a profound sense of completion. They had fulfilled Cornelius's vision while creating something entirely their own, a place where broken families could heal, where isolated people could find community, where the understanding that love transcends loss was lived out in daily and practice. Later that evening, as the last visitors departed and the community settled into its nightly routines, Noah stood in the courtyard, looking up at the castle that had become their home. Lights glowed in windows where families were tucking children into bed, reading stories, sharing the kind of ordinary moments that make life meaningful. Emma appeared beside him, no longer the scared 8-year-old who had arrived with nothing but an inhaler and a handful of dreams, but a confident 9-year-old who knew exactly where she belonged in the world. "Do you think we'll stay here forever?" she asked, slipping her hand into his. "I think we'll stay here as long as we're needed," Noah replied. "And I think we'll always be needed." Above them, the castle's highest tower flew a flag that Emma had designed, a simple banner showing a tree with spreading branches, symbolizing how love grows and changes, but never dies. It was the same symbol that appeared on the key Thornfield had given them almost a year ago, the symbol that had welcomed them home to a life they'd never imagined possible. In the workshop below, the memory device hummed quietly with the contentment of a purpose fulfilled, its crystals glowing softly in the darkness, ready to help tomorrow's visitors discover what Noah and Emma had learned, that inheritance isn't just about what we receive, but about what we choose to do with what we're given. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, what we're given is the chance to help others heal while healing ourselves, to build bridges between sorrow and joy, to create homes where love proves itself stronger than loss, one family at a time.